Hi girls, and welcome to the run through of the multiple choice section of the first chemistry test for year 11 this year. So I'm just going to scroll down and go through the multiple choice questions here. So question number 1 asks about a micrometer. So the prefix micro refers to 10 to the minus 6. This one was a bit hard for a lot of you. It's obviously a topic that you didn't revise very well, but it is important to remember that you need to know your prefixes and how big they are. So when you look at this, you can see that 1 millimeter is not going to be a micrometer, so we're happy with that. But this is 1 millimeter as well. Yeah, is 10 to the minus 3 meters. 10 to the minus 9 meters is 1 nanometer. So 1 micrometer is this one in the middle. 100% of people got the answer to the next question right. So if you use your periodic table, go to period 5, go to group 17, you'll find that it's iodine. Question number 3, which of the following statements is false? We had 85% get this question correct. So the mass number of an atom is equal to the number of neutrons and protons in that atom. Okay, that one is true, so that's not false. The atomic number of an atom is always smaller than the number of electrons. No, it should be equal, so that one is false. But let's just check. The charge on an electron is equal and opposite to that of a proton, so it's negative, it's positive, so that's correct. The mass of a neutron is that of the same of a proton. They both have a relative atomic mass of 1, so that's true. So our answer for this one was going to be B. Question number 4, 96%. If you had the atomic number 18, you should be, and sorry, I don't have my periodic table, and I'm just going to get that up on my screen. You should be argon, I'm pretty sure, and it should be 3 shells. Okay, let me just get the periodic table up. So that I've got it for future questions. Yep, so atomic number of 18 was argon, so that one's there, and it's got 3 shells because it's in period 3. So question number 5, which one represents an atom in its ground state? So this one here doesn't, because it should have a 2p shell before it goes to 3s, so that means it doesn't. This second one here, we've gone 1s, 2s, 2p, 3s, 3p, 3d, 4s. That one is fine at the moment, so we'll just tick that through. The next one, 1s, 2s, 1. Okay, so that one's wrong. It's 1s, 2s, 2p, 2. Not enough there either, so that one must be excited. So yet again, our answer for this one is going to be B. Down to question 6. This one was a bit harder. We seem to forget about orbitals. So orbitals, we're not going to must have a maximum of 1 or 2, so that one's going to be wrong. May contain 0, 1 or 2 electrons. That sounds reasonable. Must contain 2 electrons. No, they can be empty or they can have 1, and they don't follow the octet rule because that's the whole shell. So orbitals is there. Question number 7. This one was very tricky. 58% of people got it right. It was one of the worst answered questions. Which one has a noble gas configuration? So if you had chlorine, yeah, it doesn't because it's just a solid atom, so it's going to have 7 valence electrons. Oxygen minus has gained an electron, so it goes from having 6 outer shell electrons to having 7, but that's still not 8. Okay, argon minus, impossible. It's gone from having 8 electrons to having 9 electrons, which you can't have in your outer shell, so that one's wrong. Now, K plus means that it's lost an electron. So it had 1 outer shell electron and it goes back to having 8. Okay, so it goes back to having a full outer shell underneath it. So what that would look like, here is K, 1 shell, 2 shell, 3 shells. Here is your 4th shell, there is the electron in it. So that's the fact that K has a atomic number of 19. If you lose one electron, this is going to go away, and what you're going to end up with is an outer shell that's complete. Therefore, you've got your noble gas configuration. So that's why it is D here. Question number 8. Which one is not an ingredient for the blast furnace? Again, very interesting that people weren't reading this one correctly. So coke is, limestone is, hot air is, iron is not. It needed to be iron or hematite. So it's one of those questions where you have to make sure you are reading completely and making sure we're slowing down and reading that question. So question number 9, in the metallic bonding model, what does the sea of electrons contain? Does it contain all the electrons? Nope, because it doesn't contain those middle inner shell electrons. The electrons in the outer shell, that makes sense, not the ones that are just in the inner shell, and definitely not the ones that are just from the P subshell. So it's just going to be the outer shell electrons. The halogens tend to form negative ions because they have a high electronegativity. They like to attract electrons. Now that one was pretty well answered at 81%. The next one going down was question number 11. Heat may be used to modify the properties of a metal. One process is called quenching, in which their metals are heated until red hot and then plunged into cold water. Quenching a metal, if we're going to cool it fast, we're not going to make larger crystals, so I'm going to cross those two off there. So we're between A and D. Now, do we want to make it harder but more brittle, or harder but less brittle? So quenching will make it more brittle. So we're not going to do that one. So that's the bit that's wrong there. That's the bit that's wrong there. And so your answer ends up being A. And 92% of you got that right. Now, this is the worst answered question in the entire test. Only 35% of people got it right. And I reckon some of them might have been a guess. Oh, sorry, guess. That's interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write them down for you so that you can see why this is the case. So if I get up my electronegativity table, and you can't see this one, but essentially we've got fluorine has got an electronegativity of 4. Now you don't need to remember these, but you do need to be able to read them. Aluminium has one of 1.5. Chlorine has one of 3. So a lot of you seemed to guess aluminium, but you are wrong, because think about this. It's a noble gas. Argon is a noble gas. That means it has 0 electronegativity. It does not attract an electron at all. So therefore my answer is going to be D, argon. Next question, great, 96% correct. Going across a period from left to right, your metallic character decreases and the atomic radius also decreases. This second part has got to do with an increase in core charge. And we know that the metals exist on the left-hand side, so that one's not going to be right. So what I do is I just go through and I tick the bits that are right, so I end up with D as my correct answer. Question 14, solid lead can conduct electricity. The best explanation, solid lead contains ions, but they are not free to move. So that one's not going to be correct. Contains electrons, which are free to move, yes. Contains uncharged particles, which are free to move. No, that's not going to help me with electricity. Contains metal atoms, and metals are good conductors. That's just not general. That's just too general. So what we were looking for there was answer B. Question number 15. Of iron, potassium, phosphorus, and chlorine, which would you expect to have the greatest first ionization energy? At 81%, we were looking for chlorine. Chlorine is the closest to that top right-hand corner there. The rest of them kind of all spread out below that, so they're not going to be our answers. Now, this one you had to read really, really carefully. So you've got here that the elements X and the element's Y. So element X here, when you look at all that, we end up with copper. Notice that it's one of the exceptions. The second element here is going to end up being in group 17. Which element was it again? Sorry, we're in period 4, group 17. So we're looking at bromine. So, will they have similar chemical properties? No, one is a metal and one is a non-metal. Group is X in group 1? No, copper is in transition metal. Okay, so Y is a non-metal, yes, but X is not in group 1. They will not be identical size. X is a transition metal and Y is in group 17. So our answer that we were looking for here was D, and 85% of you got that one right. Question number 17, which is not a property seen in copper? This one's pretty good. We got 92% here. It's definitely electrical conductivity. It has good ductility. It has the ability to form pans for cooking. It is shiny when polished. So our answer here is going to be A. Question 18, 81%. Where would we find this element? We're going to be looking at a transition metal, aren't we? Because we've got here this D subshell. So this D subshell is going to give me, our transition metal. So the D subshell there is going to tell me it's a transition metal. Is it in period 3 or period 4? So it's not in period 3 because of this. Means it's in period 4. So question 18, the answer is D. 19, as you go top to bottom down a group, 96% of people get this right. We're going to get bigger. The core charge doesn't decrease. It stays the same. The number of electrons doesn't decrease. It stays the same. And the metallic nature of an element doesn't decrease. It actually increases as you go down a group. Last question. Sally and Phoenix decided to test out various metal samples in hydrochloric acid to see if they produced hydrogen gas. The independent variable, what did they change? They did not change the production of hydrogen gas. That would be their DV. The use of hydrochloric acid would be a CV. The metals in each reaction, that sounds reasonable that it's an IV. And the size of a test tube is also a CV. So what we're looking at here is 20C, and 85% of you got that right.